Today's video is sponsored by Bellessa. Stay tuned for details about our giveaway. Love on the Spectrum is a relatively divisive show. Reviews on IMDb range from insulting garbage, this is a voyeuristic exercise, to it's so pure and wholesome. Some autistic people find it infantilizing and even exploitative, and many non-autistic and some autistic people think it's heartwarming. The second season of Love on the Spectrum US has just graced Netflix with its presence. I've watched it all and I've thought about it a lot. I want to talk about some of the things that I and other autistic people have taken issue with, some of the positives of the show. Is it an overall net good for the community, or do we need to scrap the whole thing? Are we calling for a boycott? And then I also want to address the ways in which the show has been accused of taking advantage. Did you know that none of the cast members are paid? So firstly, is Love on the Spectrum infantilizing autistic people? Now, infantilization is a type of discrimination that many disabled people face. It's when someone who isn't a child is treated as if they are a child. They aren't respected as full adults, they maybe are seen as less intelligent. Apparently a third of people in Britain think autism itself is an intellectual disability, and autism in particular does suffer from this sort of image of being a children's disorder. The music on Love on the Spectrum has been criticised numerous times.
Finding love can be hard for anyone.
It's finally my turn, my turn!
It's kind of like clumsy, fumbling baby giraffe sort of music, and they use this throughout the show, you know, when introducing people and during dates as well. The Love on the Spectrum soundtrack wouldn't be out of place in a ballet about like a naughty woodland creature or something like that. It's cutesy, it's kind of sugary sweet, it has a bit of a comedic edge to it. And if you think, well, that just sounds kind of positive, what's the problem with that? You know, falling in love is cute. I mean, that might be true, but I just think if you think for a moment about whether or not this music would be used on something like Love is Blind, a dating show about people who are, I assume, mostly not autistic, it would seem kind of ridiculous and out of place there. But I don't think this music would seem out of place in a reality TV show about children or about cutesy kittens. I just think when you have autistic people on the show who do have interests in things like Disney and Cartoon Network, and then you have this music in the background, there's a risk of viewers not seeing the participants as full adults. Now, obviously, liking things like Disney and cartoons does not make you a child. There are so many people who are not autistic who really, really love Disney. You know, how many adults are going to be super keen to go and see Frozen 3 when that hits the cinemas? But it is true that many autistic people, we go harder with our interests. It's more obvious, and we care a little bit less sometimes about what's socially acceptable. If you want a whole video on the topic of why liking things that are primarily aimed at children doesn't make you a child, then you can check out this video that I did recently. I just think it would have been easy enough to have some sort of positive romantic music that didn't have kind of a childlike edge to it. Love is Blind just used kind of copyright-free pop songs, I suppose. Me and my husband always have subtitles on and we laugh so much at some of the lyrics. It's always like, you're breaking my heart, but I'm a queen. Don't leave me. What are we gonna do now when the flood comes in? I don't know. But I mean, just some nice acoustic guitar, just some nice piano. The voiceover is often sickly sweet as well. It's kind of like they're talking through a big smile all the time. It might seem like this is not a big deal at all, but even if it was done with the best of intentions, presenting autistic people as childlike is a form of discrimination. It can be seen as a microaggression, and it could negatively affect how people view autistic people in their own communities. I think you've just got to think, do most people come away from the show viewing autistic people as equals who deserve respect? And it seems maybe not, because when a cast member, Michael, who was from the Australian series, was interviewed on Ellen, she referred to it as such a sweet show. And she also said, I like how you see it as a gift, referring to the fact that he's autistic, and then you're a very special person. And I just found that a bit uncomfortable and condescending. It sounds to me kind of like the way Ellen would speak to a child who'd done some charity work or something like that. The whole sequence is a bit weird, and there's a lot of laughter from the audience at strange moments. For example, when Michael is asked why he went on the show, he says,
my best chance to help me find a partner. That's why.
Yep.
and then the audience just like erupt into laughter, and I'm just like, why? Why did they laugh at this? Why was this funny? Is it just because his speech and delivery style is a little bit different than what people are used to? I don't think Michael was intending to be funny here, and I think it's probably jarring to have people laughing at you when in your mind you haven't made a joke or anything like that. I think in general, Love on the Spectrum is just kind of teetering on this fine line between laughing at and laughing with the participants. In this case, Michael was being sincere earlier when he spoke to Ellen, he wasn't laughing himself. Before I get on to the next thing I didn't like so much, I just want to say thank you to Balessa for supporting my ramblings here today by sponsoring this portion of the video. Balessa are on a mission to help everyone who wants to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality. And of course, there's absolutely no reason why that shouldn't include autistic adults. Balessa reached out to do a giveaway with me. If you sign up using the link below, you'll definitely get something from them, whether it's a free vibrator or a gift card that you can put towards a purchase. I personally struggle quite a lot with health issues that affect me in this area of my life, including endometriosis, and there does seem to be a bit of a crossover between chronic physical health issues and autism. So I really do appreciate having these ways to sort of reconnect with my body. I have 3 of Balessa's bestsellers with me here today. This one here is the Pebble. I feel like a mermaid opening this up with my clamshell. It does both suction and vibration, which you can change independently. There's no annoying pattern modes, so you lovely autonomous beings, you get to be in full control. We like that. It's also very ergonomic and easy to hold. It feels really nice. It's very smooth. Next, we have the lovely wine-coloured Air Vibe Pro for dual stimulation. It's remote controlled and it's completely silent. And then finally, we have the Thump. And the case for this one is super discreet. It just looks like a glasses case or something. It vibrates, it suctions, it thumps. It basically might be all you ever need. They're all waterproof, fully submersible, made from premium quality silicone, and they're USB rechargeable as well. The charging cases match the product and also my earrings, apparently. Hello. If you do want to enter the giveaway, click the link in the description, enter your email address, and see what you get. You don't really have anything to lose, you might as well. Another little thing that I've never liked about the show, which is also an example of infantilization, is this little likes and dislikes thing that they do sometimes when they're introducing a new person. They might say something like, Jessica likes beavers and hot dogs, but she doesn't like breaking the rules.
He likes vehicular cleanliness. He doesn't like celebrity obsession.
And then some little stock video will pop up on the screen to represent the different things. Not that I can come at anyone for using stock, that's not what I'm trying to say. But it just feels like this quite odd, simplistic way to sum up a person. If I was on Love on the Spectrum, it would probably be something like, Meg likes pasta and YouTube. Meg doesn't like peas or noisy eaters. It's not exactly what I would be putting on my CV, is it? I'd rather hear this person has a passion for this. They're really talented at this, or just an interview sequence where they say a few things about themselves, even if it's just their age or whatever, you know, like any other sort of reality TV show would do. The dislikes are also often sensory sensitivities. For example, I think the smell of ham was a dislike for somebody on the show, but they never elaborate on sensory sensitivities and autism, so it just feels a bit like they're wanting the audience to go like, oh, how weird, how oddly specific, the smell of ham. Again, it's this line between laughing at and laughing with autistic people, and it also doesn't help anyone to understand autistic people. Why might somebody not like the smell of ham? The fact that we often can't tune out things in our sensory environment the way other people can, so they can become very, very overwhelming and overpowering. Anyway, maybe we can reclaim the likes and dislikes thing. Comment yours below. If you were on Love on the Spectrum, what would your likes and dislikes sequence say? The editing often seems to amp up the awkwardness as well. Some scenes will kind of like end on a cliffhanger, like the autistic person will say something that we're maybe supposed to perceive as a bit unusual, or we're not sure how the other person's going to react, and then there will be this long pause, and then it will like cut to a different scene, and it will come back to that same sequence later on and replay that bit, and then the other person responded fine and it was normal. Like, you're never sure when there are these awkward pauses how much of it is just being engineered in the edit, which is common across a lot of different reality TV shows as well, but it just feels a bit harsh when you do have a cast of people who have social differences. The creator of the show, Cian O'Cleary, has said in response to criticism that he can't please everyone, but what he really wants is just for every cast member to be really happy with how they're portrayed on the show, which I think is a nice thing to say, but I also doubt that they're in the editing suite, you know, making the final decisions. And there are shots this season and things that are left in that do seem unflattering. For example, we've got characters tweezing their nose hairs, we've got zooming in on people yawning during dates and kind of using those to amp up the awkward vibes, and then later on that goes on to be revealed as a kind of nervous, anxious tic. One of the cast members buys a bouquet of sweets, which I definitely prefer to flowers for sure, and then there's a bug flying around, and you know, there are shots of him kind of trying to beat away this fly or bug with the bouquet of flowers, and that's left in. There's another scene where a cast member, Danny, is singing with one of her friends, Jake, in a restaurant in Los Angeles. They're playing the piano, and then there's at least one close-up of like an old guy looking grumpy, you know, while they're singing. And I have no idea if he was even looking like that in that exact moment or whether that's something that was kind of engineered later on, but it's as if to give the impression that aren't these two autistic people being really disruptive to the general public or something like that. And I'm just like, oh, in that moment, could we not have just shown their joy? Like, even if we did do a moody face, let's just show them singing. I don't know. I mean, maybe you disagree, and maybe some people find the awkward moments kind of relatable because, you know, we all have them. Like, maybe it makes you feel better. Because, I mean, like, even when there are awkward things happening on these dates, they often are still successful. So, I don't know, maybe people find that hopeful. The creator talks about how he just wants to portray what happened as honestly as possible. I think honesty is kind of how he justifies using these potentially embarrassing moments in the final show. And in reality, portraying these autistic people positively is not the main motivation for making the show. Obviously, it exists first and foremost to entertain people. The audience want and expect these kind of oopsie-doopsie secondhand cringe moments. Like, oh, they're getting it wrong, but isn't it so heartwarming? And I'm just so glad they're trying. They're so cute. Again, I'm sensing some infantilizing vibes here. Love on the Spectrum isn't as harsh as many other reality TV shows are. Obviously, I mean, in the edits, it can turn people into complete villains, and there's none of that here. Now, I just want to touch on something that isn't necessarily a negative of the show, but it was just something I really picked up on this time around, and it made me feel really sad. There was so much masking this season and people pleasing. Masking is basically covering up autistic traits in order to fit in better. I have a video that I posted recently on 4 different types of masking. So in the show, when one guy, Tanner, is introduced, he's concerned about his eyebrows, and he asks the crew something like, am I doing my eyebrows right? And it's left in as sort of a quirky, funny moment. Like, isn't that a strange thing to say? Why is he worried about his eyebrows? But a lot of autistic people have had negative feedback about our facial expressions and about our faces not looking animated enough. As we get older, we can start kind of going over the top with our facial expressions in order to overcompensate for that. So perhaps Tanner has been told, you know, in order to look animated, he needs to raise his eyebrows. I think he just wanted to look happy enough for the camera. And as you can imagine, it can be pretty exhausting to have to be that conscious of your own face when you're interacting with somebody all the time. There are numerous times where you can see cast members are beating themselves up and being so hard on themselves for making little mistakes or what they perceive to be mistakes. For example, they may have had a pre-planned question for a date and then they forget to ask that question. There's one 24-year-old man on the show called Connor, and he goes to this speed dating event, which is, you know, a whole other thing. It's called like Life with the Spectrum. They have puzzle piece shirts. It's very loud. When it's time for people to move on to the next date, they ring this bell and they shout like, ladies on the move. And I was like, I don't understand, because it's an event for autistic people. I never understand why there are so many things that are supposedly made for autistic people but seem like such a sensory assault. Like, I don't know, I would just personally find that so jarring. It doesn't really make much sense to me, but I don't know, maybe the people there really enjoy it. But anyway, he goes to this event, and while he's having a date with somebody, they have a piece of paper where they can check yes or no to people. And while he's still talking to somebody, he checks no. Then when that person leaves, one of the crew members says to him, you might not want to tick the box while they're there. And you can just kind of watch his heart sink. We can be so incredibly hard on ourselves when we mess up. The cast members also seem to say sorry all of the time. There's a scene where Danny apologizes numerous times because she needs to go to the toilet, you know, and she's kind of excusing herself. I relate to that so much. Like, I've said in one of my very first videos I posted on this channel that I really struggle with how to like exit an interaction and go to the toilet. I always feel really guilty, like I'm being rude to the other person. And then I see other people do it like it's just the easiest thing, like, sorry, excuse me, I'll be back in a second. And I'm like, how? That's wizardry. It just feels like you are watching a group of people who've had a lifetime of being told that they're doing things wrong. I've spoken quite a bit on this channel about a particular threat response that often comes into play when you're masking autism, called fawning. So it's basically when you try and make yourself pleasing to whatever is threatening you. So you might be very smiley and kind of passive and just sort of put your own needs last and make sure the other person is okay and feels okay in the interaction above anything else. There was one particular example of fawning on this season that really got to me. So one of the cast members is a 65-year-old man called Steve. He was there on the last season as well. He went on a date with somebody called Sharona, who seemed like she was very warm, but she was also quite extroverted and very affectionate, physically affectionate. I don't think she had bad intentions, but Steve was clearly so uncomfortable and he just couldn't tell her that. he just said thank you, thank you, thank you again and again to her. And then when he was interviewed afterwards, he said, yes, I was uncomfortable. It was too much for me. But he didn't feel like he was allowed to, or like he was able to kind of stand up for himself in that moment and say, no, this is too much. Watching this, I just find it heartbreaking that autistic people have to carry this stupid stereotype of lacking empathy when there were just so many examples of the cast members putting themselves last. Tanner, who I mentioned earlier with the eyebrows, was so conscious of making the people around him feel good. It was like it was his life's mission. And it just seemed exhausting. And this brings me to the thing I really appreciated about the show. Jennifer Cook, the autism expert who comes in to kind of help some of the autistic individuals before they go out on their dates and give them some tips. She is actually an autistic person herself, and she wrote the book Autism in Heels. And I had tears in my eyes when she told Tanner that it was okay for him to be quiet during a date sometimes, and that he didn't always need to put so much pressure on himself to always be the one who was talking. It wasn't always his responsibility to carry everything. She said, people will like you even if you're quiet, even if you get sad sometimes. And then my heart just cracked into a million pieces. And then she gave a tip which I thought would be helpful for so many autistic people, that if you kind of have an awkward silence in a conversation on a date, then you can always say something like, I can't think of anything else to say, but I'm having a really nice time. I thought that was really lovely. And then Tanner did actually go on to use that in a date. This is a message that I think so many neurodivergent people need to hear. I think this is a huge difference that I see between introverted people and autistic people with how they can sometimes interact. Introverted people who are not autistic are often kind of more comfortable just being quiet, just being a bit less expressive, just, kind of sitting there, being in the moment. And I feel like often autistic people who are masking can put a lot of pressure on themselves in social situations. And if they are just sitting there being quiet and not so expressive, we can feel this sense of guilt, this feeling like we're not trying hard enough, and kind of have this energy inside ourselves that we need to push and be as social as we possibly can and be extroverted if possible even. I think we can just feel a lot of pressure to come across as having good social skills because maybe we've been bullied in the past, we've received feedback that we're not doing a good enough job in the past. Just feels like higher stakes for us. And I just love the way, Jennifer Cook just kind of helped autistic people to collectively breathe a sigh of relief and go, oh yeah, it isn't my job to make everyone in the world happy at the expense of my own happiness. Wow, who would have thought it? I also love that she encouraged the autistic cast to be direct about sex, about asking for consent. I thought that was great. That comes naturally to a lot of autistic people. It makes sense to us. And she also spoke a lot about enthusiastic consent, which I think is great and probably something that every person, but particularly every autistic person, should have a look into if you're not sure what enthusiastic consent is. Another thing I really appreciate about the show is how it does kind of demonstrate the diversity of the spectrum in so many different ways. Sometimes people complain online that they wish there was more diversity. I think there's probably always more that you could do, but I think it's good. I think it really demonstrates why saying things like they're a little bit autistic or they're severely autistic, it's just kind of a little bit silly. How on earth would you rank these people on Love on the Spectrum? If you ask people to put the cast members in a line and rank them from least to most autistic, which would be a very dehumanizing thing to do. Can I just say we shouldn't be doing this, but just say we did it? Do you really think everyone would say the same thing? Who do you think is the most autistic cast member here? Who wins the award? The cast really demonstrates this idea of the spiky profile where autistic people can have quite extreme strengths and weaknesses. My husband hasn't seen this season of Love on the Spectrum, but when he watched the previous seasons, he did say he felt like he came away understanding what autism was a lot more. I think the show could help people to understand what is meant by spectrum. It's not that every person on this earth is a bit autistic and there's a spectrum that goes from human to autistic and everyone falls somewhere on that line. When we say spectrum, we just mean that there are some people who are autistic, not everyone is autistic, and those people who are autistic are so different from each other. Apparently 50% of people in Britain think that everyone is on the spectrum somewhere. Yeah, maybe this is helpful representation for those people. But do these positives make up for the fact that the autistic cast are not paid anything for taking part. In 2022, the following was posted on Backstage.com. This isn't an acting gig. It's all about people being themselves. We are a fun, respectful production aiming to raise awareness about autism and celebrate difference. We are open to a diverse range of people. We want to represent the spectrum as best we can. As we are a documentary series, we cannot pay for participation, but we do cover any meals and transport costs incurred. So they say, as we are a documentary series, we can't pay. And I do think there is a bit of a fine line between reality series and documentary. I suppose documentary sounds a little bit more highbrow, and reality TV in recent years has come under fire a little bit for being exploitative, for not paying people enough. So I don't know, maybe that's why they've kind of made that distinction there. I do wonder if autism wasn't a disability, if they would be able to class it as a documentary, which is maybe something to think on a little bit. But apparently you don't usually pay documentary participants. I suppose in this case, it could be argued that it could compromise the integrity of the project, you know, if people were signing up for the show for financial gain rather than purely because they wanted to find love. Also, and this is something that I'd never really thought about before, it can be seen as kind of exploitative to pay someone for their involvement in a documentary because they may agree just because they're desperate for money and not because they actually want their story to be broadcast to everybody on TV. What do you think about that? I do feel like it's a little bit convenient if you can use morality as a reason to justify not paying the people who make your project possible. But in a debate that I saw on Reddit, a lot of people claimed that it was kind of okay not to pay the cast of Love on the Spectrum because people are not paid anyway for being on reality TV shows. Someone even said, documentary series treats autistic participants the same way as neurotypical participants. Internet gets mad. But it isn't true because the cast of Love is Blind, they are paid. The only prize at the end of Love is Blind is true love. But rest assured, the contestants on the dating series are still paid a small salary. According to a lawsuit filed by a contestant, the cast are paid $1,000 per week, up to $8,000 throughout filming the whole show. But the contestants were kind of arguing for the amount of time that they were expected to be filmed. That ended up working out as less than the minimum wage in California. The cast of Love Island are paid too. Now, even if you feel like the cast of things like Love is Blind and Love Island, they're not paid like loads and loads compared to, you know, like the overall budget for the whole of these shows. They're still being compensated for their time and for the time that they're having to take off work in order to take part. I don't know, what are we trying to suggest here? That the autistic people wouldn't be missing any work anyway? I mean, to be fair, maybe they won't. Love is Blind, they basically live on set. Love Island, I've never watched it, but I assume they basically live on set. They're being filmed constantly. I don't think that's how Love on the Spectrum works. It's more like organized interviews and then organized dates, little bits and pieces that are recorded. So probably technically, you know, if they do have a job, they can still go out to work and film around it. And sometimes they actually go to their workplaces and film them at work as well. And probably some of the participants don't work. But if you don't work, it might be kind of nice to be paid a little bit of money by Netflix. It could be argued that Love on the Spectrum is preying on the desperation of families and autistic individuals to find love. And you know, I'm not necessarily suggesting it's all awful and everyone has malicious intent, but I do think it's kind of important to remember that this is not being done purely as a charity sort of matchmaking service for autistic people. Is this matchmaking service an equal exchange of value? Some would say yes, and the sister of a participant who was on the first season of the US Love on the Spectrum said the following on Reddit. They were very upfront with us that they would not be able to compensate us, but would cover any expenses incurred. To be honest, money was the furthest thing from our minds. My brother has yearned for a girlfriend for years. His entire adult life, all he wanted was a partner in life who would accept him for who he is. He is a sweet, kind man and has so much to offer someone, but despite his and our numerous attempts over the years, there was just no one out there that wanted to give him a chance, and that's all fine, I understand. We would never just expect that from someone, but the tears my mom showed on the show were real. Our fear was that he would end up alone, and that thought was terrifying to us. We didn't know what kind of situations they'd provide him on the show, and to be honest, we didn't care. The fact that he would be going on his first date ever was so exciting to us, not to mention the global awareness that was brought to the autism spectrum was somewhat unprecedented. What is a couple of $1,000s or whatever the compensation would have been compared to this kind of opportunity? If the company had to compensate, they may not have been able to fly back and forth around the country to film all the participants they did, or to have Jennifer Cook fly. We would have gladly forgone that compensation in favor of those costs. Obviously, I can't speak for anyone else on the show or anyone who felt jilted by the production team. I can only speak on behalf of me and my family and our experience. I will say this, we did not feel taken advantage of in any way or at any point during this process. The production team was passionate about this topic, and we felt out the love and care they had for us and our story at every turn. We are beyond grateful for them and feel blessed to have been chosen for this journey. It felt collaborative more than exploitative, like we were all working towards the same goal. We never felt like we were disadvantaged in any way. And now he's so happy and celebrating his 1-year anniversary with Rachel today. As well as finding love, as with many other reality TV shows, many cast members have gone on to build a career for themselves, mainly on social media. Michael, who I mentioned earlier, who was on Ellen, has built a really successful career for himself. He has a podcast that's doing super well, he's done a TED Talk, and he's playing an autistic character on an Australian TV series. I'm sure at this point he probably doesn't care too much about not being compensated with a few $1,000s. And maybe he doesn't care about a bit of poorly timed laughing on Ellen either. But obviously there's no guarantee of success online after leaving the show, and that might not be something that everyone involved is interested in pursuing anyway. Perhaps we should trust that the folks from Love on the Spectrum US knew what they were doing and were not in fact being taken advantage of. After all, wouldn't it be rather ableist of us to assume that was the case? Now, what do you think of that? I think it can both be true that the cast members saw enough benefit in taking part of the show that they were prepared to do it for free, but also that maybe being paid to do it would have been nice. It would have signaled to these autistic individuals and also to autistic people everywhere that we are valued. It would be the showrunner saying, you gave something to me and I'm gonna then give you this in return, because it's a huge risk putting your face out there for millions to see. Again, it is not a charity matchmaking service. I also don't feel like it's ableist to be a little bit more concerned about exploitation when it comes to autistic people. We are statistically more likely to be abused, more likely to face negative life outcomes, and more likely to face things like mate crime. Overall, I have mixed feelings. Do I want the show to be cancelled? Nah. Do I think we should boycott it? No, I don't. On the one hand, would I love it if there was an autistic showrunner or member of the production team involved here? Yeah, I think that would be great. But then am I extremely grateful for Jennifer Cook and the message she's been able to communicate to the autistic community through this platform? Also, yep. Would I love for them to listen a bit more to autistic people and get rid of things like the silly likes and dislikes? Yeah, but am I grateful for the diversity shown here, especially like Journey's story on this season? Yep, I am. Let me know what your thoughts are though. I'd love to know what you liked and didn't like. What are your likes and dislikes? Your actual likes and dislikes. But also give me your Love on the Spectrum likes and dislikes. If you'd like to support videos like this and you'd also like to get some bonus videos from me, I currently have 6 exclusive videos up on my Patreon, and you get 2 new exclusive videos every single month as well if you join the $4 tier and upwards. You also get access to the Discord community, which I think is a great place if you're considering whether you might be autistic or not. Sometimes it can be super validating to spend time with other neurodivergent individuals. If you're not sure if you're autistic, you are completely welcome. You don't have to be definitely sure, you can just be kind of exploring. If you want to stay here on YouTube and you want something light and wholesome, I have a video that I made recently reacting to some Instagram reels, some amazing Instagram reels made by autistic people, one of them being one of the participants from the last season of Love on the Spectrum, Kaelyn, who unfortunately didn't come back this time. And if you are in need of some spicy toys in your life, click the link in the description. And thank you for getting this far with my crusty voice. I've been so ill all week and I needed to film this video about 4 days ago and I couldn't because my voice completely disappeared, and now I'm doing it the last flipping minute, and now I'm probably gonna have to stay up all night editing it. So my voice is gonna be gone again by tomorrow.